George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain candidate, 12,003. I do hereby declare that George Galloway is duly...
Dear Starmer, this is for Gaza. Do I respect the Prime Minister? I despise the Prime Minister. Just suck it up. I won the election.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
And it's live from London. Get used to it. Yes, yesterday I swore in to the House of Commons, which is a story in itself. And today I vainly tried to catch the Speaker's eye at Prime Minister's questions. I didn't succeed, but they will not silence me for long. At the very least, I'll be talking to you on television, on the mother of all talk shows. I will talk to you on any platform, in any place that I possibly can, because this is an emergency. It's an emergency for England, for Britain. It's an emergency for Europe. It's an emergency for the world. The people who rule us are the worst amongst us, and they are dragging us ever closer to destruction. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Having broken the mold of British politics last Thursday, the pieces are still flying sharp and vicious in the media, which cannot even begin to accept the scale of the victory we scored last Thursday and the implications of it, even more importantly. Well, nastiness is the order of the day, crawling all over my life, my wife's life, going back to her university days in the University of Vermont, and pictures that she put on Facebook when she was 14, holding peanut butter in a store. I mean, you wouldn't believe the level of activity going on amongst the British media to do anything, everything that they can to mitigate, to minimize the scale of the victory that we won. But as we say in Scotland, facts are chiels that win a ding. Facts don't change, and the facts are these. Not only did I win a smashing victory, scoring more votes than all of the other major parties of the state put together, but in second place came a hitherto unknown local independent, unknown outside Rochdale. Of course, he's a worthy citizen of the town, but never mentioned in any of the by-election coverage, never mentioned in the bookmakers' odds. He came second. That means for the first time in the history of British politics, the two big parties of the state did not come, not first, not second. The Conservatives came third, Labour came fifth, and both of them got a tiny handful of votes. So between me and the independent, we scored 60% of all the votes cast. And despite efforts to say otherwise, it was not a low turnout. It was higher than the previous two by-elections in the country. it was a turnout that spoke for the people of Rochdale. And if, as the media say, I fought the campaign on Gaza, then Gaza won. If, as the media say, I fought the election on a criticism of the two front benches, Labour and Conservative, in their slavish support for Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza, then we won, and the government and the opposition were defeated. And that, I think, is what they find most difficult to deal with. I can tell you for the first time, this is breaking news, the Workers' Party now has more than 300 applications to stand for Parliament at the expense of the candidate. Our party is too small to even fully absorb the tripling, quadrupling of our size in the last 4 weeks. We can't pay people's general election campaigns. So it's a precondition that you have to pay for your own election campaign, and I can tell you for the first time, more than 300 people want to do it. There are also hundreds of people who want to stand as independent candidates at the general election. So it is distinctly possible that 400, 500 constituencies at the general election will be contested either by Workers' Party candidates or by independents, many of them eminent and extremely worthy independents. That changes everything. They were all bowling along, you see, that the old uni party, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, two cheeks of the same backside, would sail home one or the other. What would it matter? Lesser of two evils, greater of two evils, who could decide which was which? But they thought it was going to be political business as usual, and it is now abundantly clear that all bets are off. I could go through, it would bore international viewers, I could go through some of the leading figures in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet, if we can glorify it with that title, who have small majorities at the general election that we are going to make disappear. Even the deputy leader of the Labour Party, a woman called Angela Rayner, but we call her Runner, even she has a majority of just 4,000. And there are at least 15,000 supporters of my point of view in her constituency. So we intend to put the deputy leader of the Labour Party out of business. And there are dozens, scores of other. I was going to call them big names, but they're not even big names in their own street, but they hold big titles as shadow minister for this and that. And we are going to rain on their parade. They thought it was going to be business as usual, but a most unusual thing has occurred. And it's this, that like daffodils in springtime, like Topsy, out of the earth has emerged a totally new landscape, a landscape of people who've been taken for granted for too long, a landscape of people who say this far, no further, a landscape of people, millions of them I'm talking about. I'm talking at least 2 millions, maybe 3 millions, maybe more than that, who say neither of these two big parties represent us. We have voted for them at election after election, generation after generation, but we are never going to do it again. The mold is well and truly broken. And what the implications of that for politics are is beginning to run like a shiver along the green benches of the House of Commons, looking for a spine to run up. I was on my feet every single question at Prime Minister's Questions today, but inexplicably, as the Member of Parliament with the freshest mandate in the land, the Member of Parliament who was attacked in an unprecedented, literally unprecedented way by the Prime Minister of the state, standing on a lectern like a little street corner Napoleon, denounced my electors, denounced my victory, denounced my voters, denounced. Just last Friday, at the state's expense, a purely party political affair. I'll be looking into the public expenditure implications of that. But having been attacked by the Prime Minister, no less, for the first time in history, an MP, his election, attacked by the Prime Minister, I still inexplicably failed to catch the Speaker's eye. But they can't shut me up forever. I have a right to a maiden speech, and I've asked for that to be on Tuesday. So for next Wednesday's show, you'll be able to see some of the highlights of it. And some of the things I'm saying here now, I will have to say to the House of Commons, even though they don't want to hear it. But in any case, they won't silence me, because I'm talking to far more people right now and over the course of the next few days than any speech in Parliament is ever likely to attain. Our show last Sunday was the biggest show we have ever had in all the years of the mother of all talk shows. We had 677 live callers calling into the show. No television show in history has had 677 live callers. There will be 3 million views at least of last Sunday's show by the time next Sunday's show comes around. And when you add this Wednesday's show, well, we're truly in record-breaking areas. Our following subscriptions on YouTube, my following on all my social media platforms, has all gone through the roof. The Workers' Party is at least 3 times, maybe 4 times bigger than it was 4 weeks ago, quite apart from the hundreds of people who want to stand for Parliament under our banner. The number of people excited, the best people in the land, excited by what happened in Rochdale is significant. I got my parliamentary term underway by tabling a motion yesterday hailing the beginning of a Rochdale revival. And the clearest sign, the first daffodil of that Rochdale revival, is the reopening of the world-famous, soon-to-be world-famous, Town Hall. For those of you who know it, it was where many of the scenes of Peaky Blinders were filmed. It was so magnificent that Hitler intended to deconstruct it brick by brick and take it to Berlin. It is a tremendous piece of renovation, a tremendous tribute to the town of Rochdale and all of the people involved in its renovation. I hope that many of you will come and visit me there. We'll be holding activities there all the time. It's available for the public to hire. So I put down a motion hailing it in the House of Commons. Right at this moment, not a single other member of Parliament has signed it. That's how sore they all are. I haven't had any unpleasantness from my former and now renewed parliamentary colleagues, but the father of the House, the longest serving member of the House, did walk me in up to the Speaker's chair. It was only later I realized, although my wife realized it immediately, that he was actually wearing a Ukrainian flag around his neck as a tie. It can't be called a tie. It's far too big and wide for that. It was a Ukrainian flag around his neck as he walked me to the Speaker's table so I could swear in as a member of Parliament. There are a number of constitutional conundrums emerged yesterday. First of all, as a result of a decision in the British Parliament in 1688, I'm not making that up, in 1688, a newly elected member must be walked to the Speaker's table by 2 members of Parliament, 1 from each side of the House. So what would happen if none of the parliamentarians agreed to walk a new member up to the table? Well, that would mean that the election had no validity, that the member could not sit down, could not speak, could not ask questions, and the people of the constituency concerned would not be represented in Parliament. Now, if that's not an anachronism that needs to be cleaned up right away, I really don't know what is. The second and more significant one is that I was forced to pledge allegiance to King Charles and all his heirs and successors. Better hope that Prince Andrew doesn't emerge, given all the mystery surrounding the royal family right at this moment, we better hope that next in line doesn't suddenly become Prince Andrew, because I've had to swear allegiance to him. Now, I'm a Republican. I don't believe in kings and queens and lines of succession. But if I had not sworn that allegiance, I would not have been allowed to become a member of Parliament in 2024. That's the reason the Irish Republicans cannot take their seats in the House of Commons, because they're not prepared to lie about it. From my point of view, it would be foolhardy in the extreme to lose the opportunity to be a member of the British Parliament with all the platform that that brings, the ability to represent the good people of Rochdale, just because I had to swear allegiance to a king I don't believe in, and his heirs and successors that I don't even know who they may turn out to be. But there's just two anachronisms that I point up for the constitutional nerds amongst you that need to be attended to. Let me turn to the big issues of the day. The Houthis in Yemen have sent a letter to Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, saying that the only way in which they will give safe passage to the Royal Navy to try to salvage the sunk British oil tanker in the Red Sea is if Rishi Sunak sends an aid convoy by land through the gates at Rafah and into the occupied Palestinian territory of Gaza. And that he requires, Mr. al-Houthi, requires a signed statement from me vouchsafing the sincerity of Rishi Sunak's intentions. I've no idea why they did that. They didn't consult me in advance of it. But of course, I'm ready to assist any legitimate British interest. I stress the word legitimate, but I think it's an entirely legitimate demand of the Yemeni government that Rishi Sunak and Britain should send an aid convoy directly by land into Gaza in exchange for being allowed to salvage the sunken British oil tanker. I've let it be known that if I can be helpful, I'm ready to be helpful, even though the request assistance from the Houthis had nothing to do with me. I've got to say that, or someone might come bursting through the door, arresting me for somehow being in touch with the people who sank the oil tanker. I am not, but I'm ready to help. The demand for aid in the Gaza Strip is not, of course, something that any right-thinking person could deny. After all, children, now dozens of them, have literally starved to death. Yes, in 2024, starved to death in the Gaza Strip over the last few days. Some of them skeletal horror pictures of the kind last seen when the glorious Red Army smashed down the gates of Auschwitz and liberated the surviving prisoners of the Nazi beasts, the Jews and others who were holocausted in the death camps of Nazi Germany. Some of these pictures are too much to bear. Many people can no longer look at them. Many people in power apparently have never looked at them. Otherwise, they would not be as aghast as they at least pretend to be when comparisons are made between these two horror stories in the last less than 100 years. The death camps in 1940s, in Poland, in Germany itself, elsewhere in occupied Europe, in Ukraine, in Babi Yar, in the death pit, where it was up close and personal, and where the SS lounged smoking while their Ukrainian allies massacred the Jews in their scores of thousands, walking on top of the bodies to finish off anyone who seemed to have a flicker of life left. Of course, in terms of quantum, what's happening in Gaza cannot be compared to the Holocaust. 6 million Jews alone died in the Holocaust. Tens of millions of people died at the hands of the Nazi beasts. That has not happened in Gaza. But the intention is just the same. It's a genocidal intention. And the character of the suffering is just the same. If you starve a baby to death in Gaza, it looks just like a starving baby in one of the death camps of the Holocaust. If you mercilessly cut down with shot and shell, rocket and missile, from land, from sea, from air, a captive people in a cage, what is the difference between that and what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto? And what is the difference between the uprising of the Jews in the Warsaw Uprising and the uprising of the Palestinian people in the face of the genocide which the ICJ, the highest court in the world, has already found to be a plausible description of Israeli conduct in the Gaza Strip? Nobody wants to know about that in Britain. Nobody televised the ICJ deliberations, not even their finding, when they sent Israel for trial on charges of genocide and issued a list of peremptory directives that Israel must immediately comply with, which would have stopped the killing, but which has not stopped the killing. Now, Joe Biden, with his ice cream cone, about to describe the State of the Union in the American capital, Washington, D.C., just about now, certainly within the next few hours, he keeps saying there's going to be a ceasefire. Laughing gas Kamala Harris says that we must have an immediate ceasefire for 6 weeks, at which point the killing would begin again. I say finally to you, I've seen too many ceasefires. I've been in this Palestine cause for more than 50 years. I've seen ceasefires come and I've seen them inevitably go. We need much more than a ceasefire in Gaza. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night on the mother of all talk shows. Why don't we suspend all candidates in all parties, in all elections, until Israel approves them? Is that the democracy we want? And we have to ask ourselves, why is the entire political class in Britain in thrall to a tiny little country 2,200 miles away from here, and nothing can be said by anybody here which they don't like? What is it? What hold is it that this little country has on our politics in Western countries? We all know in America it's about money, but the sums of money here in Britain are paltry. By American standards, you'd laugh. Are these people enthralled to Israel for 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, in which case they're precious cheap? If other lobbyists knew how cheap they were, they'd be moving in and getting a piece of the action. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know why they are so terrified of Israel that they're ready to sack their own candidates in the middle of a by-election. That's how scared of Israel they are. And when this is all over, we have to ask ourselves how, why, when British politics became effectively outsourced to Netanyahu's Israel, whose pleasure or displeasure dictates who can stand, who can win, who can be elected, and what policy they can follow.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, we've got a poll running, as always. 22,000 people have voted in it already. Will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? yes or no. You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter or X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, be sure to share with all of your contacts, all of your followers and friends. Ditto if you're on other platforms that allow that to happen. If you want to call the show to have your say, here are the numbers. If you're in the US or Canada, it's +1 844 944 3344. If you're in the UK or Ireland, it's 0808 196 5522. It's toll free, it's free of charge. If you're in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Max Blumenthal is journalistic royalty, if Americans believed in royalty. He is a prince amongst men, and I'm proud to call him a friend of mine. He is an author, the journalist, and the editor at the Grey Zone News, the preeminent news outlet in the world today. If you're not following it, you really, really are missing out. And he joins us now on the mother of all talk shows. Max, thanks for coming back on board so soon after we spoke with you last. I wanted to talk to you about the fast developing political situation in the United States, where Nikki Haley has finally withdrawn, and Donald Trump is the heir presumptive of the Republican nomination, just at the time when Joe Biden's senility and dramatic decline in intellectual cognition has become ever more obvious to everyone. It's Donald Trump for president in November, isn't it?
Well, first of all, George, congratulations on such a huge victory. As I said on Twitter, it's a rare glint of hope in the midst of Gaza's dark night. And maybe I'll be joining you there at some point to talk more about what we're going to talk about now in front of an audience in London, if I'm allowed in.
Yes, you will be.
Inshallah. And what we're experiencing here in the United States is a moment of extreme political uncertainty. No one knows who will be the nominee for the Democratic Party, given that most voters, Democratic voters who voted for Biden in 2020, consider his age to be a serious issue, which may even be disqualifying. But they're just storming him through all of these primaries, hoping that he can pass through without any opposition. And he will face, likely, Donald Trump, who's facing all sorts of indictments amid a campaign of obvious lawfare in which the Democratic party elite is freaking out because the Supreme Court is refusing to disqualify Donald Trump from certain ballots. And so it looks like he will stand for election. And then you have an electorate that is less enthusiastic about either candidate than even among Trump's own base than we've seen in the past. And you're witnessing this dramatic protest vote against Joe Biden, particularly in areas where there are more highly educated young people who tune into alternative media, like the kind that we produce, in protest of his sponsorship of the genocide in Gaza. 20% of all voters in Minnesota, close to 20%, voted uncommitted in protest of the genocide, over 100,000 in Michigan. So that's going to go all the way to the convention in Chicago. In 1968, where Richard Daley's police staged a riot against anti-war protesters outside the convention and shut them down inside the convention. We're going to witness a similar protest. And if the genocide continues into the summer, it's going to make what happened in 1968 look like a gentle coffee klatch.
I think all of that is exactly as I was reading it, but I needed more clarification from you on the Supreme Court decision. It was unanimous, unexpectedly, but it has restored Trump to the ballot in Colorado. Is that a harbinger? Is that a harbinger of an absolute restoration across the rest of the country, or might there still be hiccups for Trump?
I mean, I think what we saw in Colorado was an aberration, because there you had a Secretary of State who was looking for political prominence among the anti-Trump fanatics. She didn't have any constitutional authority to suspend him from the ballot, or he didn't have any constitutional authority to suspend him from the ballot. I'm sorry. The Colorado court made a very arbitrary ruling in Colorado. I'm getting it confused with Maine. And it was always going to be appealed at the Supreme Court. The judges who voted to suspend Trump did so on very weak grounds. And so I'm not surprised that this happened. And I think the freak out we're seeing by the Democrats, by the kind of party establishment, is relating to the fact that it's going to be very difficult to disqualify him from other ballots. But I think, for those who are true Democrats, small d Democrats, we need to understand the danger of a highly politicized campaign to strip someone from their ability to run for office, an incumbent president, solely on the basis of the fact that they're seen as a rogue figure by the opposition. It's the kind of politics that takes place in countries where the U.S. imposes sanctions and alleges that elections were stolen or rigged, where the U.S. is what the U.S. is currently doing to Venezuela, which has suspended a putschist, insurrectionist candidate funded by the United States and trained by the United States, Maria Corina Machado, from standing against incumbent President Nicolas Maduro in the upcoming elections. The U.S. is doing the same thing within its own borders.
Yes. Now, of course, they're running out of time for the lawfare, aren't they? I mean, it's already March. The election is in November. Given the snail's pace at which U.S. justice or injustice travels, it's overwhelmingly likely that it will be Trump versus Biden.
Yeah, can you imagine the debates? I mean, Trump has had his own problems with slurring, but I mean, Joe Biden drifts off after about a minute or two. He was actually on a late night talk show in the U.S. and was mocking Donald Trump's age and trailed off himself and said, well, never mind. So the debates are going to be incredibly interesting. It's going to be a sad commentary on the state of the American political system and on the party establishment in both parties, but especially within the Democratic Party, where an increasingly, I would say a plurality of Democrats want to replace Biden, feel like their intelligence is being insulted by having such an uncharismatic figure who's not even present, who is determined by a Justice Department Solicitor General to not be mentally competent enough to be fully aware of his own son's corruption in the Burisma case. I think there's a lot of discontentment aside from the Gaza issue. And then we haven't even talked about the economy, which I assume you're experiencing the same thing across the puddle there, where average people just can't afford groceries anymore.
Quite. Now, we've not talked about laughing gas Kamala. Is there a possibility, even at this late hour, that she might actually be shoehorned in instead of Joe? Maybe his bath chair slips or some other mishap, and that they put her in? Is that even still possible at this stage?
I mean, the Democrats would have to be incredibly Machiavellian to do something like that. They would decide to lose the general election to Donald Trump and decide that it's easier for them to be throwing rocks on the outside of the White House. They always raise a ton of money when Donald Trump is president. The media elite love Donald Trump in office. People actually watch their conspiracy programs like Rachel Maddow's, which spent 4 years convincing her audience that Donald Trump would eventually be removed from office, arrested and jailed for his secret ties to Vladimir Putin and his collusion with Russia. None of this turned out to be true, but Rachel Maddow made herself into a major celebrity made millions of dollars, is now on the lecture circuit, earning tons of money. So they may actually want Donald Trump to win. There's no way they're going to win with Kamala Harris, who has never won a delegate in any presidential election in her life. An unknown character actually beat Joe Biden in American Samoa last night, who had never campaigned there. He won 3 delegates. That's more than Kamala Harris has ever won. Kamala Harris's popularity for a black vice president, for the first black vice president, is low among black voters compared to other black public figures who have stood for the presidency, like, for example, Jesse Jackson. She's essentially someone who has been placed there by Obama from behind the curtain, just as Joe Biden was. And if you look at her numbers among the general electorate, she's less popular than Joe Biden. The Biden administration, their public relations team, has sought to hide her from view, and they're allowing her to surface for 2 reasons. One, Biden is unable to handle the rigors of the presidential stump or the campaign. And number 2, the unpopularity of Biden among minority and young voters, specifically related to the issue of Gaza, which is why Kamala Harris was trotted out to Selma, Alabama, this historically significant civil rights site, to call for a phony ceasefire. And after she waited for the applause line, then she said, for 6 weeks, meaning Israel gets a genocidal vacation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Does that seem to mean that there will be a 6-week ceasefire? Can we infer that the U.S. still has enough control over its own attack dog, Netanyahu, to be able to pull that off?
What I think the U.S. has been doing, whether it's in Doha or elsewhere, is trying to get the Israelis on the same page for a 6-week genocide vacation. And once they got the Israelis to agree to that, they started to point the finger at Hamas, to blame Hamas for the starvation of people in Gaza, to blame Hamas for the aid not getting in, and declare that until Hamas accepts this 6-week quote unquote humanitarian pause, the aid couldn't go in. And now everything is on Hamas's shoulders, which means that Israel and the U.S. are working hand in glove to twist Hamas's arm on the issue of prisoners, because Israel doesn't want any of the major security prisoners, which it holds in prisons in Israel and the West Bank, like Marwan Barghouti, to come out. The thing that Israel fears most is a national unity government, a Palestinian national unity government that features Hamas without Hamas taking the lead and a popular figure like Barghouti at its head. So all of these negotiations, to me, feel like the U.S. acting in its historic role as Israel's lawyer.
Yeah, let's switch theaters for a moment. Today in Kiev, Mayor Klitschko signed an edict abolishing Tchaikovsky Street and renaming it Victoria Nuland Street. You can see why Tchaikovsky, Victoria Nuland. I mean, in historical terms, cultural terms, you can see the reasons why. Tell us what you think. I think it was Talleyrand said on the death of a political opponent. What did he mean by that? What does Victoria Nuland's resignation or retirement mean? What does she mean by that?
Did that actually happen? They changed the name of the street?
Yes, this day.
I mean, it just shows you how debased and cartoonish the post-Maidan regime installed by Victoria Nuland in Kiev has become. They would replace a street named for a famous Russian composer with a scarcely known neoconservative U.S. operative who served in Republican and Democratic administrations. Honestly, don't know precisely why Victoria Nuland resigned, there may have been some major disagreement about the plan for Ukraine. She was openly pushing for a major U.S. delivery of aid and weapons to persecute the war, to take the fight to Russia with ATACMS, long-range missiles. She clearly wanted attacks on Crimea, attacks on Russian territory, like the kind of terror attacks we've seen on Belgorod, where a Christmas festival was attacked, where people have been civilians killed in the street because Ukraine is performing so poorly on the battlefield. It may be that she was pushed out because the Biden administration is forced to accept reality. They've been mugged by reality, as the veteran neocon Irving Kristol said. And they've installed in her place as a sort of placeholder, I think his name is John Moss. He's someone who helped preside over the disastrous but much needed U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. But we can deduce, just given the trajectory of Victoria Nuland's career and her legacy, that her resignation has everything to do with the failure of the Ukraine proxy war. This is someone who installed Vitaly Klitschko into office in the first place. She said in her leaked phone call with Jeffrey Piat, then the U.S. ambassador in 2014, that she called him Klitsch, should stay on the outside, and Yats, referring to Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the Ukrainian zillionaire oligarch, should get the attaboy. In other words, he becomes the first president of this unelected putschist coup regime. Maybe she's no longer able to pull strings in Kiev. And it's also worth noting that Vitaly Klitschko has openly criticized Vladimir Zelensky, who is under pressure from all sides, and accused him, ironically, of running an anti-democratic regime. So Klitschko could be in the running for the presidency, as could the Ukrainian former chief of staff of the military, who Victoria Nuland was actually recently in Kiev. She was actually recently there in order to try to paper over and quell a dispute between him and Vladimir Zelensky, and it looks like she failed there.
So
in any
it could
case,
be the beginning of the end, couldn't it?
Well, one thing I can say for sure is Victoria Nuland will return to a place like the think tank she founded, the Center for New American Security, which is funded by the arms industry, which she said must be whose profits she said must be considered when Americans support, whether in American support for Ukrainian aid. In other words, she guaranteed herself her next paycheck through her role in the Ukraine proxy war. This is the kind of corruption, just criminal corruption, that's been legalized inside the Beltway as officials like her pass through the revolving door. But yeah, the Ukrainian proxy war should have ended by now. The failure of the Ukrainian forces to hold Avdiivka means they can no longer attack the Donbass. NATO weapons have failed to turn the tide of battle. The German tanks that we were told would help deliver, and Bradley Stryker vehicles that were said to be the magic bullet for Ukraine's counteroffensive, are being destroyed at rapid rates. And all the profits, as Victoria Nuland said, are coming back to the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and places like Texas and Colorado and California, where the arms industry is based. Meanwhile, graves of 17-year-old Ukrainian girls are being found now in Ukrainian military cemeteries. That's blood on Victoria Nuland's hands.
Indeed so. Max, you and me in the Houses of Parliament over the next couple of months, it's a rain check, as you say, on your side of the puddle. Max Blumenthal, a prince amongst men, and the editor of the Grey Zone News. Thank you for joining us. I much appreciate it. Will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? You can vote now, yes or no. 23,500 people have already voted. Torwind says Max is the man and gives me faith that real journalism is not truly dead as long as people like him and Aaron and a few others still exist. Amen to that, Torwind. Let me take a quick break, and then I'll be right back.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Well, you get both of my films, Killing Kelly and The Killings of Tony Blair, free of charge if you subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. For less than the price of a cup of tea per week, you can support my work. I hope you will do it. Now, Sunday's podcast was a record. Currently, it's number 5 in Turkey, 4 in Thailand, and 1 in Vietnam. Good morning, Vietnam, where we are the number 1 political podcast on Apple. It's currently higher in the UK politics chart than The Times, Russell Brand, and Owen Jones. How about that then? Still lots of comments coming in about the opening hour almost of the show and about my win in Rochdale. Reese J says, finally a man I can support and get behind. Will be the first time I go to the polls when this chap goes national. Thank you for that. Keel Jones says the press will harass GG but won't dig into Prince Andrew's life though. And Fran Harwood says, you're the man to do it, George. You've been through it all before. You're made of tough stuff and even stronger now, by the grace of God. Thank you. Angela Sharif says, how many Workers' Party candidates have we got, George? Can you ask Corbyn to join? Well, I haven't seen Mr. Corbyn yet since returning to Parliament yesterday morning. I expected him to sit beside me, as he almost always did in the last 37 years, but he wasn't in for PMQs. He won't join our Workers' Party, and that's fine. What I have said is that he should launch a coalition, an alliance, and he should lead it. I'll support it. He should be the leader of it. But he's not as yet in a position to announce that, I think. El Mission says, I do love seeing the MP title added to GG's caption. Crack on, GG. Okay, let me go to the lines where Becky in California stands by. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here.
Welcome. Go ahead.
I have a question about Asaf Kaplan. If you remember, he was an IDF former spy with cybersecurity speciality who was appointed to Keir Starmer's office in 2021. He was appointed.
Yes.
Do you remember? Yes, it was all over the regular media with some consternation. But since then, it's been dropped. And as far as I can tell, he's been scrubbed from at least the surface layers of the internet. I don't know if he's still there. He may have moved on. He was appointed as Director of Social Security. And his expertise actually in Israel, I understand when he was in the IDF, was spying on Palestinians with a view to blackmailing them. And it looks to me as if some kind of Faustian deal was done, which needed to be monitored in the Lotto office. I don't know. I have no idea. But I would really like it if you would take an opportunity to challenge Starmer on that appointment and find out what's happened. Because it was shocking that it ever happened. And even if
yeah. Well, let me make the obvious point that he's not here to defend himself. If he'd like to call the show and answer the points that you've made, he's more than welcome to do so. If he's still in the UK, it's 0808 196 5522. I can't vouch for any of the points that you made. I simply don't know. I don't know the man. I've never seen the man. I do recall the story, and it was indeed reported in even mainstream media. Whether he's still there or not, or what his role was when he was there, I honestly don't know. I don't even know Keir Starmer. He's not been in Parliament long. I've been in Parliament longer than Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer put together, and Ed Davey, the Liberal MP leader. I've been in Parliament longer than all three of them put together. But I don't know Keir Starmer. I only met him once. I was introduced to him as he was being shown around the Parliament by one Keith Vaz, a former Member of Parliament of some notoriety. And you can make of that as you will. At the time, Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. Keir Starmer was the DPP, and Keith Vaz was a person of interest to the authorities around that time. I don't have any means of questioning Keir Starmer, but I can raise these matters in the House of Commons, and I promise you, Becky, that I will do so. Faraz is in Denham. What's next for GG? Go ahead, Faraz.
Well, listen, good evening, George. And first of all, huge congratulations on your David and Goliath moment last week.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing, wonderful, and really echoing the sentiment of so many people that needed to be said and done. So I can only say huge congratulations there. I guess 2 points for me, if I may, George. The first one was my disappointment now entering Parliament, why the SNP, who have equally made the right kind of noises about the challenges that we're seeing in Gaza, haven't aligned with you and worked with you as you entered Parliament to work as one. That was hugely disappointing, and I'd welcome your thoughts on why that has happened. And more broadly, looking forward to the future, George, the ambitions of making that disruption in Parliament by getting more seats, thinking about that eventual election that's coming up at a more domestic level, thinking about housing, crime, health. How do you see those policies, those key policies that will matter to the people of Britain in the voters that you're seeking to get? How will you formulate your thinking in those sorts of key areas that will also bolster your real chances to make a real difference in Parliament by gaining more seats?
Well, what an exceptional call, perspicacious and eloquent. Thank you for it and for your kind words. I was actually walked into Parliament by the father of the house with the Ukrainian flag around his neck, and on my right-hand side, a nationalist MP, Scottish nationalist MP, not from the SNP, but from a second Scottish nationalist party called ALBA, led by Alex Salmond, whom I'm sure you remember. And I was very grateful to him. His name is Neil Hanvey, and it was very good of him to do it. Jeremy Corbyn was supposed to do it, but had forgotten about a long-standing appointment in Margate, far away from Westminster, that he had to attend. So I was grateful to Neil Hanvey for standing in. He is one of those nationalists, along with the SNP, who have been much, much better than the big parties on the issue of Gaza, on the issue of Palestine. One of the reasons why he's not in the SNP is because he has very similar views to me on these, what shall we call them, identity politics issues, trans issues and other sexual and gender-related issues. He would be much closer to me than the SNP would. And this is an issue that has divided people a lot. You know me, I always say it, for us, I ain't no liberal, bruv. I'm not liberal on crime. I'm not liberal on punishment. I'm not liberal on all kinds of things that other people have become so liberal that they have lost touch with reality and have alienated millions of voters. Keir Starmer, for example, was unable to define what a woman was. There are people on the front bench of both Labour and Conservative parties who insist that a woman can have a penis, that a man can have a cervix, and all of this, what I call transmania. I give that as an example, but there are other issues. We, for example, reject the cult of net zero. We don't believe that the world is going to spontaneously combust by 2030. And that therefore our people must be penuriized and frozen in order to avert it. We don't buy that kind of apocalyptic politics, but some people do. And some of those people are also good on Gaza. Some of those people are also good on other issues. So it's quite difficult for everyone just to come together because we have different views. We have different views on NATO. The SNP want to join NATO in an independent Scotland. Well, where's that at? They want rid of nuclear weapons, but they want to join a nuclear weapons alliance called NATO, even though they would have no need to do so, having achieved their primary goal of an independent Scotland. So there are many fissures, if you like. And we're not going to be able to square that circle. We're not all going to get together in one happy camp. But what we can all do is face in the same direction on the biggest issues of the day and bring about political change, not the least of it, proportional representation, which will allow all of us to be represented properly in the numbers that we deserve to be represented in subsequent parliaments. If we could get a hung parliament, for example, at the upcoming general election and force through a proportional representation system, then British democracy would be far healthier after it than it was until now. So there are things that we can agree on. There are things we'll never agree on. I'm going on Saturday morning, for example, I'm going to march with the great leader Arthur Scargill, the leader of the epic miners' strike in 1984-85 in the town of Doncaster, and I think many people will come to join us. Now, my being there means a number of things. It means, for example, that I, as an honorary member of the National Union of Mine Workers, since 1982, so more than 40 years, I have held as one of my proudest possessions my membership card of the Miners' Union, and who fought every day of the miners' strike for an entire year, whose heart was broken when the miners were defeated, and who predicted that everything that would happen if the miners were defeated then went on to happen in the print union, struggle against Murdoch at Wapping, and in many, many other industrial struggles. What does this mean? It means, first of all, that I do not accept the argument that the 1,000 years of coal under our feet are necessarily dead and buried. After all, we're importing coal from all kinds of other countries, Poland and Colombia and all over the world. We're importing coal when we're standing on coal because Thatcher was allowed, by her own ideological drive and zeal, and by the cowardice of the official labour and trade union movement, was able to close down and flood our coal mines. Number two, it means that we in the Workers' Party are first and foremost with the workers. We are not first and foremost with those who want to put them out of work in pursuit of a highly contentious set of apocalyptic visions of where we are headed as a planet. Doesn't mean we say there's no global warming, there's no climate change. Doesn't mean that we want plastic littering all of our beaches. I hate plastic. I'm so old I lived in a time of brown paper and string and wish that we could bring that era back. It doesn't mean that we are vandals that want to pollute the planet or any of these ists and isms that are thrown at us. But we are the Workers' Party, and it is our number one duty to defend the interests of the workers and their families. For us, excellent call. Thanks for making it. Sean is in Northern Ireland. Let's hear from him. Sean, welcome.
Hello, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, good, sir.
Great. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your massive win, because I've been an admirer of you for many a year. The point I wanted to put was I wanted your opinion on what you thought of Sinn Féin's move to go over to Washington on St. Patrick's Day and shake hands with Genocide Joe, the man who stood and licked an ice cream while debating whether he might call a ceasefire, might not call a ceasefire, while the children in Gaza are emancipated, being blown apart. I would like your thoughts on what you think.
Well, thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. I'm not a supporter of Sinn Féin. I once was, but I'm not now. I regret their decision. I'm not going to condemn it. I can see how they came to that decision. They're close to achieving power north and south of Ireland and achieving their overarching historic goal, which I wholly support and will until my dying day, the reunification of a 32-county Irish Republic. So I understand the arguments that they've been making, but I think they have reached the wrong judgment. I think I'm not alone in thinking that. I think many of their voters also think that. I think many of their members also think that. Many of their important historic members also think that. But the decision's made. As I say, I'm not going to condemn them. I don't want to weaken the struggle for Irish reunification. So I tend not to highlight it. But as you ask, I must tell you that this is not the time that anybody should be shaking hands with Genocide Joe Biden, not least because you'll come away with very dirty hands. Let me take a quick break, but after the break, it's Rabbi David Mivasair, one of our most significant guests over the last 12 months. He's a retired activist rabbi and a political commentator. Stay tuned for Rabbi David right after this. There is hope. The hope is in our numbers. We're already boycotting all kinds of products, and it's working. They're all reporting significant drops in profit. We need to boycott. We need to protest often in numbers and with imagination. When we get the opportunity to vote out the parties that are supporting the genocide, we must take them And if that opportunity isn't yet available in your area, you need to make it. You need to join with people intelligently, shrewdly, in a way that will punish the incumbent genocide enabler. You can link up your church with another church, your trade union with another trade union, your community organization, your nursery, whatever, with another in Palestine. You need to reach out to them so that they know that people in Canada and in Britain and everywhere in the world are thinking about them, because that is important for their morale. We're entitled to feel a kind of gut-wrenching sadness at what is going. We're entitled for our hearts to be broken, but we're not entitled to allow our spirits to be broken, because the people there are depending on our spirits.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
The poll tonight: will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? Yes or no? Almost, 24,273 people have voted. Get your vote in. You've got about 40 or 45 minutes to have your say. Rabbi David Mivasair was a guest on the show just a few months ago. He's one of the many thousands of Jewish community heroes that have been actively, not just passively, but actively protesting this genocide in Gaza from the very beginning. And I'm very glad to say he joins us again now. Rabbi David, thank you for coming on the Mother of All Talk shows again. I'm glad that both of us are fans of the hat. And I'm glad to say, if we can adjust your camera shot a little, we'll get a better view of your hat so that it can be compared with mine. That's it. Perfect. Rabbi, what are you thinking about the statement from Kamala Harris? There needs to be an immediate ceasefire, applause line, for at least 6 weeks. What's the meaning of that? How cynical is it? How likely is it to come to pass?
Well, it's completely cynical. I'm glad you asked that question. And what I think is 6 weeks from now is when the majority of the Democratic Party primaries will be over. So she's looking for a way for the Biden administration to look like it's doing something good so that people will come out and support it in the primaries, instead of getting the kind of votes that they've been getting like they did yesterday in Minnesota, where 20% of the Democrats who even bother going to the polls say that they're uncommitted. They don't support Joe Biden, right? So to say that they want a ceasefire or a pause for 6 weeks, and then, yeah, you can start killing them again after 6 weeks when the primaries are over. It's totally cynical. And if they wanted a ceasefire, they could just pull Israel's chain, and Israel would have to stop. The weapons, the bombs, everything comes from the U.S., paid for by U.S. taxpayers, forced into it by the Biden administration. They can make it stop in a day if they want it.
Elsewhere in North America, we'll come back to Gaza, but elsewhere in North America, there's breaking news that Canada is going to refund UNRWA. All these countries that on Israel's fake allegations cancelled their subscriptions and subventions to UNRWA, the main source of food, of medicine, of schooling, of all services in the Gaza Strip. All these countries that stopped paying on what turned out to be an entirely bogus set of Israeli allegations that named UNRWA personnel were involved in the events of October the 7th. I mean, we're glad if it's true that Canada are resuming, but what does it tell you about these Western governments that they stopped paying on such baseless allegations?
They're just subservient to Zionist interests. I think the leadership of these countries is afraid of losing support of Zionist donors. That's what I think it is. Just the very next day after Israel made those allegations, which was the day that the International Court of Justice upheld South Africa's claim, that day is when Israel released this kind of fake information that was never backed up by anything. And that day, countries like Canada and others immediately stopped supporting UNRWA, as you said. And now Canada is resuming it. I think another thing we can learn from that is how important it is for us to keep up the pressure on our government. The minister responsible for this, who I'll just say, shamefully, he's from a Muslim country. He's very supported. He was supported by Muslim Canadians who were proud of him to become a minister. He was booed and he was harassed and he was followed around and he couldn't go to meetings and he had to shut down his events, and this went on and on and on with so much pressure. So finally, they are resuming $25 million of support for UNRWA this month, and they said they'll continue to support UNRWA as they should.
Well, protest works, Rabbi. That's why they're trying to shut it down in your country and in mine, and more of that coming up later, I'm sure. Going back then to the situation in Gaza, how did you view the, for me, grotesque spectacle of American-supplied bombs raining down on the Gaza Strip, whilst on the beach, actually more often in the sea, were landing American parachutes with enough packed lunches for just 28,000 people out of 2.3 million, and just once on one day. This is almost obscene, isn't it?
It's bizarre theater. That's all it is. Again, the U.S. could just snap its fingers and make Israel open up the two border crossings where thousands of trucks have been sitting for months. There are thousands of trucks loaded with food, medical supplies, housing, and they're being held up by the Netanyahu government with complete complicity from the U.S. So airdropping food is, it's beyond theater. To me, I thought it was like during deer hunting season, airdropping bales of hay. So the deer would come out of the forest and the hunters could shoot them, because that's what happened. Starving people ran to get food and were shot dead. I got a message from a woman in Gaza who I've been helping and supporting for months, saying that her 18-year-old nephew, this was yesterday, George, this happened just yesterday, her 18-year-old nephew went to get flour from one of these things and he was shot dead, an 18-year-old boy. And his mother's left alone because his father was killed previously. So the U.S. wanted to get food to Palestinians. It could do it like right away. It could just do it.
Wow, Rabbi, I'm not blowing smoke at you. I think that Jews like you that oppose all of this are the bravest people on the earth, particularly there in Israel. It's a small number, but it is amongst the most courageous in the world. I'm talking about religious Jews like you and secular Jews like Miko Peled and others. What is it like being in the Jewish community, but taking the line that you're taking?
Okay, I have to hold off on that idea that we're the most courageous people in the world. We're not. We're totally not. There are people living in Gaza and other Palestinians in the West Bank and Palestinians in refugee camps all over the Middle East, and many, 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 many other people manifests far more courage than it takes for someone like me, living in a very comfortable situation, to just speak out and say what has to be said, right? So I appreciate appreciate the intention of what you said, but I can't let that pass. I refuse to accept that compliment. But you ask, why is it so difficult? Oh man, over the last few decades, actually, even in the course of my lifetime that I can remember, Judaism and Jewish institutions have been really taken over by Zionism and by the supremacy of Israel, to the point where right now, if somebody wanted to join a synagogue and they say, you know, I want to join this synagogue, but I don't believe in God, and I don't keep the Sabbath, and, you know, I eat pork and I never pray, but I want to be a member of the synagogue. They're, oh, welcome. Of course, we want you. Just come in and join us. But a person who's been a member of a synagogue for 20 or 30 years and says, you know, what Israel's doing, that's genocide. I can't support it. That person's going to be ostracized and removed from the synagogue. I mean, I know many people. People are contacting me as a rabbi saying that's happened to them, that part of their life is being in a synagogue and now there's no place for them to go. You know, so I'm making the point that Jewish institutions, tragically, synagogues, have been really like occupied by Zionism. And to stand up against that is difficult. I don't know how much courage or bravery it takes, but it's difficult. And there are many, many, many of us, and we, I think, will become the majority of Jews. I don't know if we'll be able to replicate large, influential institutions, but it's, you know, that is coming. And right now, it's like an emotional struggle for many Jewish people, because they can be very easily.
It must be.
Yeah.
And I stand corrected for the reasons that you gave. I suppose I'm thinking about the moral courage to be a dissident in such an overwhelming, hegemonic sea of Zionism. And you make the point that one day, God willing, you'll be the majority. I'm not old enough to remember, but I'm a historian enough to remember when once upon a time you were the majority. It's a little known fact that the only Jewish member of the British cabinet of Prime Minister Arthur Balfour, who made the infamous Balfour Declaration, the only Jewish cabinet member at that time, opposed the Balfour Declaration. And at that time, the great majority of Jews were socialists, communists, leftists, progressives. They were the greatest people on the earth, actually, at that time. And Zionism represented a tiny sliver of Jewish opinion at the time that the Balfour Declaration was made.
That's right. Even when I was growing up in the 1950s and 60s in America, in the Reform Jewish movement, people were opposed to Zionism. There was no adulation of Israel. Even the reason why Reformed temples are called temples was to make the point that the temple that was destroyed in Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 70, close to 2,000 years ago, is gone. And the synagogue that's here in our town that we go to, the place where we go, that's really the temple. We don't need to replace that old one. We're not yearning to go back to where it was, right? The place where we live, that's our home, right? And what we do there, that's our religious activity. So instead of actually calling it a synagogue, they call it a temple. That's where that comes from. And Zionism wasn't that popular, really, I think, until after 1967, in the 70s. You can see it coming on. And now it's become, in the mainstream Jewish institutions, it is the absolutely dominant position, but it didn't always be that way. And it doesn't need to be that way, and I don't imagine in the next generation it will be. Very, very few young Jewish people with a conscience, young Jewish people who know what Judaism's really about, or even what basic morality is about, feel any attachment to Israel. There was a survey done in the U.S. in 2021, before the last time Israel attacked Gaza so horribly and killed over 2,000 innocent people. Before that, there was a survey done by the Jewish Electorate Institute that just does surveys of Jews for their political views. And it showed that 40% of Jews, 20% of Jews under the age 40 think that Israel should not exist. That was 3 years ago. I can't imagine what it is now. So this is not going to go on. It's going to go on too long. It needs to have already stopped, but it's not going to just go on and on. It will change.
Rabbi David, you're a very, very bright, shining star, and I'm glad that you shared your wisdom with us here on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Thanks very much for joining us. Rabbi David Mivasair, a retired activist rabbi and political commentator. Very powerful testimony that, I thought. Let me know if you agree. Let's take a short break, and then it's your calls all the way to the end of the show. Stay tuned.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, I told you that on Sunday we had 677 calls trying to get on the show. It's a Wednesday night record already, and the show still has more than half an hour to go. From the following countries we have had calls this evening: UK, US, Ireland, Canada, Egypt, Pakistan, Jamaica, France, Germany, Italy, Rwanda, and Hong Kong. My goodness, we could fill this show with just phone calls, never mind guests, but we do get the best guests, don't you think? Let's take some calls. Chris is in Birmingham on Starmer. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, George. Congratulations. It's about time someone give the whole lot of them a wake-up call. A breath of fresh air, absolutely. Starmer,
Thank you, Chris.
Jeremy Corbyn in the back. You agreed to all his manifesto and then turned on him. And Jeremy Corbyn's such an honest man. I wrote a sketch called The Honest Broker. It's online. Anyway, that's another story. But I want to really give you all my heart, all my love. You are a breath of fresh air, the truth unto power. Only somebody like you could do it. You have the guts of a lion. Hello? Is he there?
Well, Chris, I'm very touched by that, and beautifully expressed in a wonderful British regional accent. I love accents. I love regions. I love 1,000 flowers in the garden. I love 100 schools of thoughts contending. I love it. It's democracy, and you are a true Democrat. I want to make the point, often forgotten now, that Starmer stabbed Jeremy Corbyn in the back and Rishi Sunak stabbed Boris Johnson in the back. It's almost Shakespearean. Both of them are usurpers, dripping in the blood of their predecessors, whom they destroyed in order to take their jobs. What a nice place the British Parliament is. Chris, thanks for that lovely call. The Yorkshireman is on next from, well, you guessed it, Yorkshire. Go ahead, Yorkshireman.
Hi, good evening, George. Can you hear me?
Very clear. The whole world's listening. Go ahead.
Thank you, George. Well, what can I say? I've followed you for many years, George. This is the first time we've spoken. I think the first thing to do is to congratulate you on your achievement, and it is a quite remarkable achievement, what you've done. And you are speaking for so many different people across the country and across the world with regard to what is taking place in the Middle East right now. As I say, I've followed you for many years. Don't be put off by, or not put off, confused, if you like, by the Yorkshire accent. I have a mother who is born and bred Yorkshire for many generations, but a father who is from the southern part of Iraq. So I've had skin in the game and followed your comments, your movement, your protesting for many years. And it's really been a pleasure to have somebody who really stands up and champions the other. If we're going to use some post-colonial theory, the Orient needs to be spoken for, not just the Occident. And I think, first of all, it's a thank you on that part.
Well, God bless you for that. When I took my Red London bus from Big Ben to Baghdad in 1999, almost a quarter of a century ago now, I passed through, of course, on the bus in Tunisia, and a lady there, in tears, said that I came from the Occident, but I had an Oriental heart. And it touched me very greatly, as your call has now. And if your mum and dad are still around, please give them my greetings and tell your father that I still dream of his country, of Iraq. It entered my bloodstream and it will never leave it. I do think that I am speaking for a very large number of people. The exact number is difficult to tell. If we had proportional representation, it would be enough, definitely, to return many MPs into the House of Commons. First past the post is a very much more difficult nut to crack. But I'm absolutely certain that at least hundreds of thousands of people share our perspectives on war and peace and on economic and other social issues inside our own country, but at least on war and peace. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have reached a state of consciousness in Britain that impels them to reject the war after war after war imperial delusion of the British state. And I'm glad and proud that it has fallen to me to be, if you like, the premier spokesman for those people. It is the 11th anniversary today of the passing of Hugo Chavez, the man who won more democratic elections and referenda than any political leader in the world, in all history. My wife and I, thank God, were with him in his final election campaign, which he won despite the massive efforts of the United States to try and unseat him. And we Gayatri and I will never, ever forget the sheer joy on the streets of Caracas at the great victory of Hugo Chavez that day. And the pictures of that campaign will live forever in our minds. And the picture of Chavez like a bull on the stage in the pouring rain addressing the final election rally is a classic that you should try to see. Quite soon afterwards, Hugo Chavez died of a mysterious illness, as did President Kirchner of Argentina, as did Fidel Castro, the leader of the Cuban Revolution, as did Yasser Arafat, the president of the Palestine movement, the PLO. I don't know if any or all of them were got at, or if they were got at by whom. But let's just say I don't accept food or drink from strangers. Ian McKillop says Israel doesn't want a ceasefire because once the journalists get in and show the world their crimes, there will be an outpouring of rage against them. Quite true, Ian. Morns Lad said, so the father of the house wore a Nazi-type flag into Parliament, but it's not acceptable to wear a Palestinian flag. It's not a Nazi-type flag. It was the Ukrainian national flag, but he wore it must have known, of Ukraine's Nazi problem. He must have known it because until a couple of years ago, it was regularly featured in The Guardian, the BBC, the New York Times. All wrote about Ukraine's Nazi problem. It's only after the Russians moved in that all of that was excised from our pages, from our consciousness. Frank Dillon says, George is our spy in the camp, a cat amongst the pigeons. Yeah, a cat, a lion cat. Let's go to Bobby Nitro in Rochdale. A good man, I've met him. Bobby, go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, I wondered if that name might ring a bell. You might remember I was a man who had a face for radio. But anyway.
You're actually a very... No, before you go on, you're actually a very funny, witty, wise guy. And if you've not restarted your stand-up career, I strongly advise you to do so. I'll be your manager. Go on, Bobby.
Yeah, this is your man on the front line. You're jewel in the crown, Rochdale. The birthplace of cooperation, of the greatest parliamentary orator of the 19th century, and possibly the home soon of maybe the greatest parliamentary orator of the 21st century.
Thank you so much. Most kind, Bobby.
No, it's okay. I promised your team that I'd be the critical friend, and they will be receiving some very interesting information overnight about our housing crisis that we actually have here that you might want to look at. I won't bore your international listeners, actually, with the detail. But as you know, there's more than one community in this town. The way the media have painted it, they think there was actually only one. And because of one of your tweets that you put up, I've now been cancelled by a number of community groups after being referred to as an Islamist. But anyway, we won't go into that.
It's such bollocks, Bobby. I mean, we won wards or were competitive 50-50 in wards, where only a small proportion of the voters were visibly or from their name, you could say, were Asian people.
You're quite right. And as the photograph on the Twitter feed showed, we were all sat there having a bacon butty and having a pint down at Wetherspoons, which is very grateful to Regal Move and the number of shout-outs that they've had.
All these Islamists that were campaigning for me were all repairing for a bacon sandwich and a bottle of beer in the Wetherspoons called Regal Moon, which I've not been in yet, but I'm told there's a cracking pub.
Yeah, it caters for all tastes. I know you're a man of soft drinks and you don't imbibe, and we all respect that. And it's a very welcoming place. And what I just wanted to say finally, because I'm sure there's other people waiting, is that it's central, because I've been looking at the feedback round here, that you're seen as providing those opportunities for the young and security for the elderly. And one of the ways that met is sort of through housing. So I just want to wish you luck for your maiden speech, and I hope that it echoes locally as well as internationally.
Thank you, Bobby. By the way, we're launching the Greater Manchester region of the Workers' Party in Manchester on the 17th of February. And you, Bobby, and anyone who's in the area, living in the greater Manchester area, is more than welcome. I'll give all the details later on social media, times and so on. But it'll be at the Sheridan Suite. You possibly know it, but if not, it's quite close to the City Ground. And we'll be meeting, I think, from 2 till 5 on that day. That's the 17th of February. All members of the Workers' Party, or all who want to join it, and all who want to stand as candidates for it, are welcome on the 17th of February. I hope you'll be one of them, Bobby. Thanks for that call. Username 1234, MTGA, make trilbies great again. It's a fedora, but trilbies are good too. Homburgs are good too. They just don't fit my shape of face. Annette McMaster says, these MPs are vindictive, spiteful babies. Go get them, George. I intend, Annette, thanks for your support. Manuel Persinger says, George Galloway, when you get the swamp cleaned up, please come to the USA. We have a swamp here that needs your attention and action. Thank you very much indeed, Manuel. I often wish I had been born in the United States like my great-grandmother was, because then I could run for president, but it's not to be. I hope to visit you anyway. I wouldn't have got in under Joe Biden. I might get in under Donald Trump. We'll need to wait and see. Essam is on the line from Egypt. What's next in the ICJ? Essam asks. Welcome to the show, Egypt.
Hi, George Galloway. Hello. I want to congratulate you on an epic win. That was, I mean, you demolished every party there is. And yeah, the ICJ have become silent on the issue. I expected the report, the Israeli report, to be made public, but it's everything's gone silent now. Any idea what's going on next? Or and I've been hearing.
Well, yeah, Essam, it's a very good question. I don't have the answer to it because I've been preoccupied with the election and so on. So I haven't caught up with the 4 weeks that they were given, inexplicably in my view. Why give someone you plausibly agree is committing genocide 4 weeks to comply? That's a lot of dead people in 4 weeks, but the 4 weeks is long past us now. I haven't seen anything about Israel's required response within 4 weeks, and I haven't seen any attempt at sanction for Israel refusing to comply with the peremptory instructions that they were given by the world's highest court, of which they are a member. Back to you, Essam. What's your view?
Yeah, I think they said that Israel have made the report and submitted the report, but they've made it sort of classified in a way or secret. But yeah, I want to ask you one thing that I've been hearing that President of Egypt. I'm a UK citizen, but at the moment I'm in Egypt. I've been hearing reports that Israel have convinced Sisi to open the Rafah border to allow Palestinians into Egypt. Is that true, or is it just misinformation?
Well, it's not true at this moment in time. It could become true. There certainly is suspicious construction work going on just on the other side of the Rafah gate. But it would be enormously significant if Egypt were to climb down on that point. It would be enormously significant in Egyptian political life, but it would merely transfer the Palestinian problem to the Sinai. It wouldn't change anything else. You'd still have 2.3 million Palestinians determined to recover their land. Some of them would still be prepared to fight to do so, and Israel would presumably start bombing Sinai in the way that they were bombing Gaza. And if they were bombing Sinai, they'd be bombing Egypt. And what would the Arab world's reaction to that be? So at this moment, as far as I'm aware, it is not true that Egypt is going to collaborate with Israel to the extent of facilitating mass ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. Sam, thanks for that call. The risen people of Era say, yeah, I thank our Jewish brothers and sisters for having the strength and backbone to stand against genocide. And JD says, will Ofcom try and stop you from streaming? Only over my dead body, I say. Quick correction, the Greater Manchester rally is at the Sheridan Street on the 17th of March. I beg your pardon, not February. That's the 17th of March is the launch of the Greater Manchester region of the Workers' Party of Britain. Sorry for that. William is in Bognor Regis. I love to say the words Bognor Regis. Go ahead, William.
Good evening, Mr. Holloway, and I would like to congratulate you on your thumping victory the last time the by-election has been held. You are an honorable man for all generations.
Thank you, sir.
I was a member of the armed forces, so I'm a veteran. And I would like to say, I will declare publicly that I am, not officially, but with all intention, become a member of the Workers' Party. I voted for Labour.
By the way, William, before you go on, we have, I think, unlike any other party of our kind in Britain, we have a large number of veterans. We've even got a member, a veteran of the French Foreign Legion. We've got a veteran of the Queen's Guard, the chaps that wear the big bearskins. We have no animus towards our armed services, only towards the politicians that send them, oftentimes to their deaths, to their injury, in false wars, on false causes. So we love the soldiers. We like the lions. We don't like the donkeys that send them into war. Sorry, William, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I understand that. So when I become officially, it's not if, it's when, I would like to spearhead a youth program in Bognor Regis to fly the flags of the Workers' Party. There is a lot going on in Bognor Regis which is similar to what the people of Rochdale have seen and therefore voting for you. And I'm also convinced that there are a lot of Rochdales right across the country that are waiting and yearning for this moment. So that is my first part of the contribution. The second one is the airdrop of the humanitarian or whatever they are delivering. First, I think it was done by Jordan. The king himself was doing a show, to my opinion, pushing food, and then US also did some of that. In my opinion, I think we already know that the UK has been sending spy planes from Cyprus to carry out reconnaissance activities over Gaza. So I think there might be, I'm not 100% sure, it's my opinion, that it will also be a time for the US to be using the opportunity to spy on the resistance in Gaza. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
And last but
well,
not
okay,
the
William.
least,
Thanks. No, William, I need to press on because there's a lot of people trying to get on. You got 2 points in, and both of them were very good ones, and I'm grateful to you for them. I don't entirely share your view for this reason. When I was in Gaza, there's a lot of starfish on the beach, beached there in the morning, and somebody told me the following story. I mean, talking thousands of starfish washed up on the beach, can't get back into the sea. and a man goes along the beach picking up individual starfish and throwing them back into the sea. And somebody says to him, there's thousands of these starfish. What difference are you going to make throwing individual starfish back into the sea? And he picked one up, threw it into the sea, and said, well, it made a difference to that one. So I'm not one of those that doesn't want to see even limited airdrops of aid going into the Strip, because at least somebody will get a dinner. It'll only be a dinner, and it'll only be a tiny number of them, but somebody will get a dinner. I know that the American airdrop was entirely performative and utterly cynical and to the point of wickedness. But I wouldn't say that about the King of Jordan. I have no particular affinity with or anything else with the King of Jordan, but I think for whatever reason, there'll be lots of them, the King of Jordan was quite sincerely trying to get an airdrop of aid into and he's been out on 2 or 3 of them. His wife is Palestinian. We all know, if we're married men, that how important our wives are to us and how important our wives' culture and creed is, and how if we love our wife, we must feel some powerful pull to do what we can to help in any way, however limited, the people that one's wife belongs to. I'm sorry if I sound old-fashioned, but that is me. And I think that may be one of the reasons. There'll be others for the King of Jordan's now several times participation in airdrops by parachute of limited amounts of aid into Gaza. But of course it's necessary but completely insufficient. And as the Rabbi pointed out, there are thousands of aid trucks bursting full of aid that could just drive through the gate and deliver aid to everybody. Not just a dinner, but a breakfast, lunch and dinner and all the medicine and all the things that are now non-existent in Gaza for the whole of the population. That could be done. It isn't being done because of the decisions made by men, many of them Western men. William, thank you for that call. Having spoken of my wife, let me introduce her to you. Here she comes with the live social media update. What's rattling, Gayatri?
As expected, the congratulations are still flooding in. I just want to quickly mention this comment on your Patreon in response to the poll: will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? Tom Kirby says, for the people who have not seen it, the Labour files on Al Jazeera, I cannot imagine anybody voting Labour after watching that, which is a good reminder. Danny Israel says, I voted yes, and George will, but that's under the assumption that the establishment don't cheat, and I reckon they will. Mr. Stephen Marks emails, congratulations, George. Looking forward to having an orator and an actual socialist in Parliament. Hold their feet to the fire. Ukraine, gender, net zero, Biden crime family, and the EU empire. And here's a very nice one from Lyudmila Ripnar. She says, congratulations, Sir George. I am not British, I'm Russian, and I used to love the UK. And I hope you and people like you will bring your country, once known as Great Britain, back to its old glory. God bless you. Well,
how nice is that? How lovely is that? Do we know her?
I don't know, but she's a patron. She's a patron of yours, so she's a
supporter on Patreon. I'm so grateful for all my patrons. I haven't actually looked at my Patreon page yet since the election. I promise I'll do so on my journey after the show this evening. Thank you, all of you, for your support. On that point, Gayatri, the situation now that we find ourselves in as a workers' party is we suddenly have massive name recognition. Not just name recognition of me, but name recognition of our party and attention to detail of what we stand for. In short, although we have a 10-point program. We stand for peace. We stand for working class interests. We stand for democracy. We oppose wars and exploitation. We believe in a clean planet. We believe in a clean country, but we reject the net zero catastrophism, apocalyptic visions, and so on. We respect everyone, whatever their color, wherever they came from, however they prayed, whenever they arrived. If they're in Britain, they are our people. We treat people as they wish to be treated. We have, and I keep reading people implying that, you know, I'm mean to trans people or I've been biased against gay people. Nothing, literally nothing, could be further from the truth. There are trans people who would tell you how I treated them when they decided that they wanted to identify as women. In my office, in this studio, in this show, there are always gay people. Sometimes, there have been times I've presented this show where every person working on it, except thee and me, was gay. So it is a complete falsehood that somehow we are against people because of their orientation. We refuse to turn science on its head. We don't accept that a man becomes a woman because he says he is. But if he wants to be a woman, I'll kiss him on the cheek and treat him like a woman. But I will not allow him
you have done,
to go into my... Yeah, I have done. I have literally done. But I will not agree that a man who decides he's a woman can go into our daughter's changing room at the swimming baths, because at the end of the day, he actually still is a man. I will not allow you to have, you know, a big hairy biker standing next to you in the ladies' toilet. I'll stop him from going in. But these kind of culture war issues are not our main thing. We'd prefer not to have to deal with them at all. We want to fight for the workers here and abroad so that they can have better lives, so their families can have better lives. You might say, we are followers of the late and great Mr. Tony Benn. You might say that what we are in favor of is really quite traditional, social-ism, as Mr. Benn used to say. He used to say, well, why don't we start saying, I'm a socialist. I believe in socialism. I believe in the importance of the collective, the importance of the society marching forward together. Last one from you, Gayatri.
Well, and in short, basically, our common denominator, our great common denominator is, of course, us being the workers, the 99%, those of us who need to wake up in the morning and earn our wages rather than it being paid out for us. So obviously the Rochdale win. The Rochdale win locally was very much motivated by the youth, and they played a huge role in it. I just wanted to mention this email, which is extremely lovely. It says, Dear George, your recent victory in Rochdale has been a significant achievement and a source of hope and encouragement for millions across the UK. I was born in the days when Sir Winston Churchill, a leader of profound strength and vision, was our prime minister, the year of my birth, Michael Harvey. And in the same spirit, we have an email saying, this lady is a former war child, and she says, your recent speeches on the topic have come as a clarion call, reviving our hope and waking up our energies. You have a marvelous gift for rhetoric, which as a lover of language, I delight in, and put it to the best possible use. Please know that your words do not fall on deaf ears. The majority of people, whatever their race, nationality, color, creed, we all want peace with each other. This is from Margaret Claire Ford.
How beautiful is that? And don't tell my wife, but I was also born in the year of Winston Churchill's final prime ministership. That's right. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister when I was born. Thank you very much, Gayatri. See you after the show. Will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? 27,484 people voted, and they voted thus. Will Galloway's election coalition cost Starmer a majority? On Telegram, 89% yes. On Twitter, 78% yes. On the YouTube community poll, 87% yes. And on the YouTube stream, 88% yes. That's good going on a very, very big poll. Now, don't forget, you can download this week's Mother of All Talk Shows podcast from Spotify and Apple Music. Scan the QR code on the screen right now and put us up the charts everywhere in the world. That's just a simple task. Scan the QR code on the screen right now. Time for some more calls. Andrew is in Virginia on Netanyahu. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, George, for having me.
Welcome.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. You're on the air.
Oh, yes. I wanted to talk about the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, after he massacred the peace activists on the Mavi Marmara on the Free Gaza movement in 2010, Hillary Clinton wrote up a psychological profile on him, and it was leaked to WikiLeaks, and that's one of the main reasons why she wants Julian Assange dead or jailed, eliminated, because what Hillary Clinton's psychological report on Benjamin Netanyahu was that he was clinically insane, that he had been driven mad by the death of his brother Yuri, who died in the Entebbe hostage rescue in Entebbe. I try to get all those words at the same time. Sorry. And okay. He has been the one factor since the Oslo Accords that has been detrimental to peace. Right or wrong?
Well, Andrew, I need to cut you off there because I need to get at least two more calls in and we're almost at the end, but it was a great call. Although my mind boggled at the idea of Hillary Clinton producing a psychological assessment of someone and concluding that he's insane. Maybe she was looking in the mirror at the time. Most of the great crimes against the Palestinian people were committed by so-called Labour prime ministers of Israel. But you're quite right to identify that for the last 30 years, really, the Likud, which is the party of Netanyahu, have been the overwhelming hegemonic force in Israeli politics, and that they, followers of the so-called revisionist, led by Jabotinsky, whose most famous terrorist leaders were Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir, both of whom became prime ministers of Israel, and both of whom committed very great crimes. That movement, that Jabotinsky movement, the Stern Gang and the Ergun Gang, are the reason why the late Her Majesty the Queen never visited Israel. Just think about that. Her Majesty, God bless her, refused to visit Israel throughout her long reign. And she reigned for a very long time and traveled to a very large number of lands. But she would never visit Israel because of the role played by these Israel terror gangs, the Ergun and the Stern, who in 1944 tried to assassinate not Hitler but Churchill when he was locked in mortal combat with the Hitlerites and the beasts of Berlin. They tried to blow up Winston Churchill. They did succeed in blowing up many British buildings, institutions, and people. They murdered British soldiers. They murdered Her Majesty's, or His Majesty as it was at the time, civil servants. They murdered them in the King David Hotel. They blew up 92 of them, if not 93. They hanged British sergeants by piano wire in the orange groves around Jaffa. They committed terrorist acts here in Britain and in Palestine as it then was. So Her Majesty never visited them for that reason. And it's odd, isn't it, that in all this talk of terrorism and October 7th and the rest, nobody ever mentions that these Israel terror gangs practically invented the concept of modern terrorism. It's extraordinary. Sarkar, a legend, is in Glasgow on British troops in Russia. I'm all ears, Sarkar.
First of all, congratulations, George. I'll make it really quick. Thank you so much for having you in the Parliament. Tony Benn would be really proud wherever he is. George, a very quick question. I don't know what's wrong with our country. We cannot control our borders. We're happy bombing Yemen. We're happy bombing the Houthis. We're happy supplying arms to all the corrupt states all over the world. The German ministers were having a secret, but not a so secret right now, conversation which got leaked. They can blame the Russians. They can blame whoever. But you know what, George, I'm scared about? Believe me, no one is, except The Guardian. I don't think any other press has been, speaking so openly about this. It has been leaked that our forces are on the ground in Ukraine. George, if there was a recipe for suicide, do you think is there a better recipe for suicide for British politics than this, and German politics as well?
Brilliant call, and wonderfully succinct from a legend, Sarkar in Glasgow. I haven't yet had time to listen to that tape recording, but I know what's in it. And what's in it is German top brass, top of the tree, military personnel discussing a terrorist attack on the Kerch Bridge and discussing openly the presence of British forces involved in the targeting of the missiles. Once I can get all the information that is available, I promise you, Sarkar, it'll be one of the issues I'll be raising in Parliament. Last call is from Chris in Hong Kong, China. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, George. Very briefly, because it is tail end. On behalf of the People's Republic of China, may I offer congratulations to the Right Honourable Member for Rochdale 1, George Galloway. What does it feel like being a Right Honourable Member again?
You never thought you'd be able to say that. It just goes to show, Chris, you never know what's round the corner. The stars were all perfectly aligned for this historic victory. And I don't believe that constellation has been disrupted. Sorry, back to you.
I've been defending you all week. Let me finish off here. A great deal stated on Israel, some of the evils of Zionism. Let's finish off on this fact. On December 2nd, 1948, Albert Einstein, Hannah Arendt, and another 11 Jewish intellectuals sent a very famous letter to the New York Times condemning the terrorists who helped found the Israeli state, among them Begin, and in that letter they referred to the actions of these terrorists in founding the state as akin to Nazis and fascists. They were, of course, referring to what happened in the Second World War. Now, that was made in 1948, and not a great deal has changed. In Gaza, we're now witnessing genocide. And China has been
I've got to call a halt only because of the hour. Chris, do call back on Sunday. We'll further discuss it, and we'll prioritize your call. It is something, isn't it, when arguably the greatest Jew that ever lived, Albert Einstein, certainly the most brilliant, the most hailed, the most scientifically significant, the most revered, the man who taught us more about the nature of our world and the universe than any other person in human history, was a very committed anti-Zionist. Long live the memory of Professor Albert Einstein. And thank you for tuning in tonight in such numbers. And God willing, I'll be back again on Sunday evening at the same time with the mothership, the Sunday edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. I hope that this week we'll record well over 3 million viewers, but we're not satisfied with that. So come back on Sunday and bring another viewer with you. Why don't you? Here's to Rochdale.